A frail, invisible little beggar girl bursts into the hospital and interrupts the millionaire, who is desperately crying by his son's side, about to lose him to a mysterious illness. With eyes full of fear and courage, she faces the most powerful man in town and says, "Sir, I know who poisoned your son." When the millionaire sees what she's holding, his heart races, and what he does next leaves everyone completely stunned. The acrid smell of disinfectant assaulted Richard Sterling's nostrils the moment the automatic doors of St. Vincent's City Hospital slid open. His white silk shirt, now crumpled and dark with sweat, clung to his body as he sprinted down the crowded hallways. The sound of his Italian leather shoes echoed against the worn linoleum floor, marking the frantic rhythm of his heart. "My son, my Gabriel." The words came out ragged, almost a whisper. His wife Paula followed, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. In the 2 hours since the call from the school reporting Gabriel had collapsed during recess, Richard had experienced a terror none of his millions could erase. In the pediatric ICU, the attending physician was explaining something about atypical symptoms and inconclusive tests. Richard couldn't process the medical jargon. All he saw was his 9-year-old son connected to machines, pale as snow, his lips faintly blue. "But he was fine yesterday," Richard exploded, grabbing the doctor's coat. "He had breakfast with me, talked about the soccer game with his friends." A nurse gently separated them. Her calloused hands contrasted sharply with Paula's manicured fingers, which trembled uncontrollably beside the gurney. The nurse, her name tag reading Martha, had a face etched with lines that suggested someone who had witnessed lifetimes of suffering. "Mr. Sterling, we need to stay calm now," Martha said, her voice firm but kind. "We're going to run every necessary test." Richard nodded, but inside, his world was crumbling. He controlled everything in his life, his companies, his employees, even his business rivals. But here, in this run-down hospital with water stains marking leaky ceilings and gurneys showing hints of rust, all his influence felt useless. As the medical team wheeled Gabriel away for more tests, Richard and Paula were left alone in the waiting room. The silence between them was deafening, broken only by the distant beeping of heart monitors and the shuffle of wheelchairs down the halls. "Do you think it was something he ate?" Paula whispered, breaking the silence. "I don't know. He ate the same thing I did last night." The answer came muffled, as if Richard was speaking from the bottom of a well. His mind raced through possibilities: poisoning, a sudden allergy, some unknown disease. That's when she appeared. A scrawny girl in tattered clothes and tangled hair emerged in the hallway. She couldn't have been more than 10, but her face held the weary expression of someone who knew too much of the world's harshness. Her bare, dirty feet left faint tracks on the recently mopped floor. Hospital security guards were already moving to intercept her when she stopped in front of Richard. Her dark, piercing eyes seemed to see past the expensive suit and the subtle gleam of his watch. "Mister," her voice trembled but sounded determined, "I know who poisoned your son." The world seemed to freeze. Richard felt his blood run cold. Paula stifled a gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. The guards hesitated, as shocked as everyone else. "What?" Richard managed to stammer. "What did you say?" "I saw him. That man in the blue coat." The girl pointed down the hall. "He put something in your son's IV bag when nobody was looking." Nurse Martha approached quickly. "Child, you can't be here. This isn't a place for children on their own." But Richard held the nurse's arm. Something in the girl's eyes made him believe her. In his years of business, he'd learned to read people, and this child wasn't lying. "Wait," he said, "how do you know this? Did you actually see it?" The girl nodded vigorously. "I was hiding, because the security guards were chasing me. I saw him messing with the stuff when the nurse stepped out. Then he threw a little empty vial in the trash. Richard felt his legs weaken. He had to sit down on one of the hard plastic waiting room chairs. Poisoning. His son had been deliberately poisoned. But why? By whom? Why should I believe you? His voice came out harsher than intended. The girl flinched back a step, fear flashing in her eyes. Because my little brother's sick, too. He's got the same thing your son has. Tears began to trace paths down her dirty cheeks. Nobody wants to help us because we live on the streets. But I saw what they did to your son, and I thought maybe you could help all of us. Paula stood up, wrapping the girl in a protective embrace. Shh, it's okay. You were very brave to come here. Richard felt a sharp pang in his chest. Here, he was one of the city's most powerful men, utterly helpless, while a homeless child showed more courage than he possessed. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softening. "Anna, and my brother's Peter. He's only 7. At that moment, a doctor in a blue lab coat walked past down the hallway. Anna shrank behind Paula, trying to hide. "That's him," she whispered, terrified. "That's the man I saw." Richard watched the doctor, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes and trembling hands. Dr. Albert Evans, according to the ID badge clipped to his coat. Something in the way he averted his gaze from Richard cemented his suspicions. Nurse Martha, who had witnessed the entire scene, approached with a thoughtful look. "Mr. Sterling, we need to check this out, but we must be discreet." "Why are you helping me?" Richard asked, surprised by the unexpected ally. "Because I've seen too many things swept under the rug in this hospital, and because that girl is right. If this was done deliberately, others could be at risk." Meanwhile, down the hall, Dr. Evans disappeared through a side door. Richard made a decision. "Anna, you stay here with my wife. Martha, can you show me where the nearest waste disposal area is?" The nurse nodded and started leading him through the corridors. Along the way, Richard truly noticed the harsh reality of the public hospital for the first time. The gurneys lining the hallways, families camped out on the floor, the peeling paint on the walls. Reaching the dumpster area behind the building, Richard hesitated. Never in his life had he dug through trash, but the image of Gabriel unconscious and Anna's words spurred him on. With Martha's help, he rummaged through the bags until he found a small, empty glass vial. The label was partially torn, but some words were still legible. "Chloride." "I don't recognize the compound name," Martha murmured, examining the vial. "It's not something we typically use here." Richard pocketed the vial. He was heading back when he heard raised voices coming from the waiting room. He quickened his pace and found Paula arguing with 2 security guards trying to remove Anna from the hospital. "She stays," Richard declared with authority. The guards backed off, recognizing the man who had just donated an entire wing to the hospital 2 months prior. Just then, a cry echoed down the hall. It was a young resident running towards them. "Dr. Mendez, the boy in room 312 is seizing." Gabriel, his son, was getting worse. Richard raced back to the PICU, finding a scene of controlled chaos. Gabriel was convulsing violently while the medical team fought to stabilize him. Monitors blared alarmingly and shouted orders filled the urgent air. "Richard!" Paula grabbed his arm, hysterical. "Do something! Use your money, your influence, anything!" But Richard was paralyzed. All his power, all his fortune, and he couldn't save his own son. The feeling of impotence was crushing. After what felt like hours, but were only minutes, the seizures subsided. Dr. Mendez, the supervising physician, approached, his face grave. "We've stabilized him, but his vital signs are weak. We need more tests, a full medical consult." "Doctor," Richard interrupted, showing him the vial he'd found. "You need to test this. We have reason to believe Gabriel was poisoned. The doctor took the vial, his eyes widening in shock. This is... How did you get this? It doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you analyze it and tell us if this could be causing my son's symptoms. Dr. Mendez nodded curtly and rushed off. Martha approached, leading Anna by the hand. Mr. Sterling, the girl needs to get her brother. He's alone and sick. Richard looked at Anna, seeing her conflict between wanting to help her brother and fear of leaving Gabriel's side. On impulse, he made a decision that would change everything. Martha, do you have a car? Yes, sir. Take Anna to get her brother. Bring him here to this hospital. I'll cover all the expenses. Tears welled in the girl's eyes. Thank you, mister. Thank you. As Martha and Anna left, Richard turned to Paula. We need to talk to this Dr. Evans. But when they went to find him, they discovered he had vanished. No one knew where he was. His backpack had been hastily emptied, and his locker was bare. He fled, Richard murmured. He knows we're onto something. A young resident, the same one who had alerted them about Gabriel's seizures, approached hesitantly. Excuse me, Mr. Sterling, but I saw something strange earlier. What? Richard gripped the young man's shoulder. Dr. Evans was messing with the patient charts. He seemed to be looking for something specific, and then he deleted something from the main computer system. A chill went down Richard's spine. This wasn't just poisoning. It was planned, deliberate. Someone in the hospital was trying to kill his son. Hours later, as the sun began to set, Martha returned with Anna and a smaller boy, Peter. The child was feverish and weak, but alive. Richard arranged a private room for them, overriding administrative. In protests, while doctors examined Peter, Richard received a call. It was his lawyer with disturbing news. Richard, I just got a report from the PI you hired. Dr. Albert Evans worked for years at your old pharmaceutical company. He was fired 5 years ago for... The voice hesitated. For what? Richard pressed. For theft of confidential research, experimental compounds. The phone nearly slipped from Richard's grasp. Revenge. That had to be it. Someone from his past had returned to strike at him in the cruelest way imaginable. Returning to Gabriel's room, he found Paula and Anna sitting side by side, watching the boy sleep under heavy sedation. The contrast between the well-dressed woman and the street child should have seemed strange, but in that moment, united by fear and hope, they looked like two equally desperate mothers. He's going to be okay, Paula whispered more to herself than to Anna. Anna nodded, holding Paula's hand. You have to believe. It's what I do every day with Peter. Richard watched them, feeling a profound shift occurring within him. For the first time in years, he saw beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. He saw real people, real suffering, real courage. An alarm shrieked, shattering the moment. It came from the room next door. Another child was exhibiting the same symptoms as Gabriel. Doctor! A nurse yelled down the hall. We have another case. Panicked, Richard ran to the nurse's station, where chaos had erupted. 3 children now presented with the same mysterious symptoms, and all had passed through the wing where Dr. Evans worked. It's an epidemic, someone muttered, but Richard knew it wasn't. It was something far worse. It was a deliberate attack, and his son had been the first target. As the night wore on, and the hospital filled with more suspected cases, Richard made a silent vow. He would find out who was behind this. He would find Dr. Evans, and he would get justice. What he didn't know was that the truth was far darker and more personal than he could imagine, and that Anna, the girl who had appeared out of nowhere, held secrets that could either destroy his family or save it completely. The first night was long, filled with the beeping of monitors, doctors rushing past, and families weeping. Richard stayed by Gabriel's side, holding his small hand, promising himself he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the whole truth. When the sun rose over the chaotic hospital, Richard had no idea that his search for truth would lead him far deeper than he ever imagined, uncovering secrets buried for decades and threatening not just Gabriel, but everyone he loved. And in the back of his mind, a single question echoed: who poisoned his son, and why? The answer would come, but not without a devastating price. The first rays of sunlight struggled to pierce the fogged-up windows of the PICU as Richard stirred from an uncomfortable doze in the chair beside Gabriel. His neck protested painfully as he straightened, but it was a minor ache compared to the tightness in his chest, seeing his son still pale and unconscious. Martha entered quietly with a tray. Her own dark circles spoke of a long night's work. "Coffee," she offered, holding out a lukewarm cup. "The doctors will be here in 10 minutes to update you on Gabriel's case." Paula dozed fitfully in an armchair crammed into the corner, her usually perfect hair mussed and falling across her face. Richard watched her for a moment, realizing how distant they had become over the past few years. His business had consumed so much of his time that he barely remembered the last time they'd truly talked. A light touch on his arm pulled him from his thoughts. Anna stood in the doorway holding Peter's hand. The boy looked even more fragile in the daylight, his lips cracked, his eyes sunken. "Can we come in, mister?" Anna whispered. Richard nodded. Anna guided Peter to the chair beside him, and they sat in silence, just watching Gabriel. There was something moving about the way these two small strangers cared for his son. "Peter had an okay night," Anna reported. "The doctors said his fever went down. But..." She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "But what?" Richard prompted gently. "I heard them talking. They said he has the same symptoms as your son, and that 2 more kids came in during the night." A chill traced its way down Richard's spine. 4 children now. This was no coincidence. The door opened and Dr. Mendez entered, accompanied by a woman Richard didn't recognize. She wore a more formal lab coat, its embroidery indicating a senior position. "Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Sofia Reyes, our clinical director," Dr. Mendez introduced. "We need to discuss the situation." Paula woke with the movement, getting up quickly. Anna scooped Peter up, whispered she'd be back later, and slipped out discreetly. "What have you found out?" Richard asked bluntly. "The vial I found." "Doctor." Reyes exchanged a significant look with Dr. Mendez before answering. "We've confirmed it's a chemical compound not authorized for medical use, a substance that, in small doses, can cause the exact symptoms these children are presenting." "And Dr. Evans?" Paula asked, her voice trembling. "Disappeared, Doctor." Mendez replied, "We've already notified the authorities." Richard slammed his fist against the wall. "That's not enough. My son is dying." Dr. Reyes held up a calming hand. "Mr. Sterling, I understand your distress. That's why we've decided to create a special task force to investigate this case internally. We've also isolated the suspected cases and are reviewing Dr. Evans' entire history here." "What about the other children?" Richard demanded. "2 are responding well to supportive care. A third," Dr. Mendez hesitated, "is in critical condition." Paula collapsed into fresh tears. Richard held her, but his mind was already racing. He needed to do more. Waiting wasn't an option. "I want to hire private investigators," he declared. "I'll offer a reward for information on Dr. Evans." Dr. Reyes frowned. "Mr. Sterling, we need to follow protocol." "Protocol hasn't saved my..." "Done so far," Richard interrupted, his voice thick with frustration. "I'll do this my way." After the doctors left, Richard called his executive assistant and set his plan in motion. Private investigators were mobilized, reward offers posted online, contacts within the police department activated. If anyone could move mountains with money and influence, it was him. But as the day wore on, Richard realized even his financial empire had limits. The answers he sought seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. It was then that Anna returned, bringing not just Peter, but 3 other street kids with her. All showed the same symptoms. "Mister, they're sick too," Anna explained, as the children huddled behind her, frightened. "They're all in the same spot Peter was." Richard felt a lump form in his throat. This was spreading beyond the hospital walls. How many children were silent victims while he focused only on Gabriel? Martha, who had witnessed the scene, approached with determination. "I'll get Dr. Mendez. We need to get these children seen." As the nurse hurried away, Richard knelt before Anna. "Where did you find these kids?" "Under the overpass." "It's where we stay when it rains. But last night, after you helped me, I went looking for anyone else who was sick." A profound sense of admiration washed over Richard. This girl, who barely had enough to eat, was worried about helping others. Ashamed, he realized he'd never truly cared about homeless children beyond occasional donations to charities. "Anna, you're incredibly brave," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Anna shrugged. "Just doing what's right, mister." The day passed in a whirlwind of activity. More tests were run on Gabriel, who remained stable but showed no signs of improvement. The new children were triaged, and 2 required admission. Richard felt his world painfully expanding to include all these small, vulnerable lives. Mid-afternoon, his cell phone rang. It was one of his investigators. "Mr. Sterling, we have a lead on Dr. Evans. He withdrew a large amount of cash early this morning and bought a bus ticket heading upstate." "Apprehend him," Richard ordered. "Not so simple. He's traveling under a fake ID." Richard ended the call, frustrated. Dr. Evans was getting away, taking the answers with him. It was then he noticed Paula talking intently with Anna in the hallway. The 2 seemed to be sharing an intimate moment, and again, Richard felt like an outsider in his own life. "What were you talking about?" he asked as he approached. Anna looked at Paula, who nodded encouragingly. "I told her about life on the streets, how sometimes we get sick and there's no one to help." "I'm thinking of doing something about it," Paula added, surprising Richard. "Starting a foundation, maybe, to help these kids." Richard was silent for a moment, processing. The wife he knew cared about charity galas and luncheons, not hands-on work. "That's a great idea," he finally said, and realized he genuinely meant it. An alarm blared, shattering the moment. It came from Gabriel's room. Richard sprinted back, heart pounding, to find Dr. Mendez and a team struggling to stabilize his son. "He's having another crisis," the doctor explained curtly as he worked. "We need to increase the medication." Richard gripped Gabriel's cold hand, whispering words of encouragement he didn't know he possessed. Paula clung to him from behind, weeping silently. After long minutes, Gabriel stabilized again, but Dr. Mendez wore a grave expression. "I need to be honest with you. Without knowing exactly what was administered, we're just managing symptoms. Gabriel needs the antidote. And how do we get that without Evans?" Richard asked desperately. "There's one possibility," Dr. Mendez hesitated. "If we can recover the medical files he deleted, we might be able to identify the exact substance." "The young resident said he saw Evans deleting something from the computer," Richard recalled. "Exactly. We need a data recovery specialist. Do you know anyone?" Richard thought quickly. "I know. The CEO of a top cybersecurity firm. He owes me a few favors." Within minutes, Richard was on the phone, mobilizing resources. A digital forensics expert would be sent to the hospital immediately. While they waited, Richard noticed Anna hiding. In the hallway, trying not to be seen, he beckoned her closer. "Did you see anything else that might help us?" he asked. Anna bit her lip, hesitant. "It might be nothing, but I saw Dr. Evans talking to a strange man in the parking lot. From far away, it looked like they were arguing. When was this?" "A few days before you brought your son in. The man was wearing a suit, like you, but he had a scar on his face." Richard felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He knew someone. Matching that description, Marcus Vance, a former business partner, violently ousted after being caught embezzling funds. The split had been ugly, involving threats from both sides. "Could you describe this man better?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Anna nodded. "He had a big scar right here." She traced a line from his eye toward his mouth. "And it wore a gold pinky ring." It was definitely Marcus. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs. Could it be possible? Was his former partner behind all this? The data specialist arrived 2 hours later, a young, unassuming tech whiz who immediately set to work on the hospital's computer system. Richard watched anxiously as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "Got it," the tech finally announced. "Found the deleted files. Looks like a research protocol, something about an experimental drug." Dr. Mendez leaned over the screen, his eyes widening. "This is... My God, it's an experimental neural compound. It was being tested for Alzheimer's treatment, but the side effects in children..." "What?" Richard pressed. "Can be lethal in high doses." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Gabriel had been poisoned with a drug that could kill him. "But there's a chance," Dr. Mendez continued, pointing at the screen. "The protocol mentions an antidote. We need to synthesize it fast." Richard was already on the phone with his contacts in the pharmaceutical industry. Time was everything now. As night fell again, the hospital transformed into an intense operations hub. The antidote was being fast-tracked while Gabriel fought for his life. The other children would be treated as soon as possible. Anna remained by Richard's side, a steady presence in the chaos. At some point, she drifted off to sleep in her chair, and he carefully draped his suit jacket over her small shoulders. The image of this little warrior asleep under his expensive coat made him reflect on all the inequalities he had accepted as normal his entire life. Around midnight, Richard received intel confirming his suspicions. Marcus Vance had been documented purchasing large quantities of certain precursor chemicals 3 months ago. Investigators also discovered he'd been fired from his last position following accusations of unethical conduct. The motive was clear. Now, revenge. Marcus didn't just want to destroy Richard financially. He wanted to make him suffer in the most agonizing way possible by attacking his child. When the first vial of the antidote arrived at 5 in the morning, Gabriel was the first to receive it. Richard held his son's hand as the clear liquid dripped into the IV line, praying fervently for the first time in decades. The minutes that followed were the longest of his life. Monitors beeped, doctors watched intently, and Paula squeezed his hand with painful force. It was Anna who noticed it first. "Mister, look, he moved his fingers." And indeed, Gabriel's fingers twitched slightly. Then his eyelids fluttered. Richard leaned close, whispering his son's name, and finally, after 2 terrible days, Gabriel's eyes opened. "Dad?" His voice was weak, confused. Tears streamed freely down Richard's face. "I'm here, son. I'm right here." Relief washed over the room. Even the usually reserved Dr. Mendez cracked a broad smile. But the celebration was brief. "The antidote works," he announced, "but we need to dose it carefully for the other children, and we need more." As the new day dawned, Richard was back on the phone, mobilizing resources to produce more of the antidote. Anna had woken with the commotion, and seeing Gabriel conscious, she hugged Paula in a spontaneous burst of joy. "He's going to be okay," she sighed, relieved. "We can help Peter too now." Richard watched the scene and made a decision. "Anna, I want to do something for you and Peter, and for the other kids." Anna looked up at him, hopeful. "What, mister?" "I'm going to make sure you all get proper treatment, and then—" He hesitated, glancing at Paula, who nodded encouragingly. "I want you and Peter to come live with us. If you'd like to, of course." The shock on Anna's face was palpable. Tears sprang into her eyes. "For real? But we're homeless." "Not anymore," Richard said firmly. "You saved my son. Now it's my turn to help." But the joy was cut short by a new development. Gabriel was improving, but he was far from recovered. And there was the matter of Marcus Vance, who remained. At large and dangerous, a police officer entered the room bearing news. "Mr. Sterling, we have an update. We found Dr. Evans." "Where?" Richard asked eagerly. "In the county morgue. He's been dead less than 12 hours. The shock was absolute. Dr. Evans dead. This changed everything. "How?" Richard managed to ask. The officer hesitated. "Apparent suicide. Left a note confessing to everything." Richard felt the floor drop out from under him. If Evans was dead, who else was involved? Was Marcus acting alone now? As more details emerged, a grim picture formed. Dr. Evans had been blackmailed by Marcus Vance into poisoning Gabriel, but when he realized more children were being affected, he panicked and tried to flee. The note revealed deep remorse and details of Marcus's operation. But there was one disturbing detail in the letter. Marcus had promised Evans that only Gabriel would be targeted. The fact that other children had been poisoned wasn't part of the original plan. "Then how?" Richard muttered, confused. It was Anna who offered the shocking answer. "Mister, I think I know. I saw Dr. Evans giving shots to some of the homeless people outside. I thought he was helping them." The horror of the realization hit Richard like a physical blow. Evans, in a desperate act of conscience or panic while trying to flee, had likely been trying to administer the antidote, or perhaps dilute the poison, using the same compound, inadvertently spreading it or causing harm. "He was trying to help," Paula whispered, horrified, "in the worst possible way." The complexity of the situation weighed heavily on Richard. Nothing was black and white. Evans wasn't just a monster, but perhaps a weak man who made terrible choices and then tried to fix them in an equally terrible manner. As the morning progressed, more children received the antidote. Peter improved rapidly, much to Anna's joy. But the atmosphere in the hospital remained tense. Marcus Vance was still out there, and Richard knew he wouldn't rest until he was found. Gabriel slept peacefully now, his breathing regular, color returning to his face. Richard watched him, marveling at the fragility and strength of human life. "Are you going to go after Marcus?" Paula asked, reading his thoughts. "Do you need revenge?" "Not anymore," Richard replied, surprising himself. "But I need to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Anna, overhearing, approached them. "Mister, I saw Marcus once near the overpass. He was giving money to some rough-looking men." "When was this?" "A few weeks ago. They looked like thugs, like he was hiring them for something." Richard felt a shiver. Marcus was planning something bigger. What if poisoning Gabriel was just the beginning? The police officer returned with more information. "Mr. Sterling, we found evidence linking Marcus Vance to a larger network. It looks like he's involved in smuggling experimental drugs." "So Gabriel was just a test?" Richard asked, incredulous. "Worse, he was a demonstration. Marcus was showing potential buyers what this drug could do." The revelation was devastating. His son had been used as a guinea pig in a product demo for criminals. White-hot rage burned in Richard, but he forced it down. He needed a clear head for what came next. By the afternoon, Gabriel was strong enough to talk more. Richard held his hand while explaining a heavily sanitized version of what had happened. "Did they catch the man who hurt me?" Gabriel asked, his eyes still weak. "Not yet, son, but they will." "And the girl, Anna?" "She's going to live with us," Richard smiled. "You're going to have a sister?" Gabriel smiled for the first time since the ordeal. "Cool. She seems nice." Richard felt his heart warm. Gabriel's innocence, preserved despite everything, gave him hope. Later, meeting with the authorities, Richard outlined a plan. He would use his connections and resources to set a trap for Marcus. The criminal wouldn't be able to resist another chance to hit Richard where it hurt. But as he planned, a new worry surfaced. Gabriel was improving, but doctors had detected something unexpected in his latest scans. "There's evidence of residual neurological damage," Dr. Mendez explained gravely. "It might not be permanent, but we'll need to monitor him closely." The news was like a bucket of ice water. Even in saving Gabriel, Marcus had left scars that might last a lifetime. That night, while everyone else slept, Richard remained awake, thinking. Marcus had attacked Gabriel, wanting to destroy him, but he had inadvertently created something unexpected, a purpose in Richard greater than just making money. Anna slept in an armchair, Peter curled beside her. These two, children who had nothing, had changed his life completely. He hadn't saved them merely out of gratitude. He'd saved them because, for the first time, he understood what truly mattered. A movement in the hallway caught his attention. It was Martha, doing her nightly rounds. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "Too much thinking," Richard admitted. Martha sat beside him. "You know, I've seen a lot in this hospital. Families destroyed, children suffering. But I've also seen transformations, like yours. I haven't transformed, I just realized who you really are," she finished for him, "and who you can become." Richard nodded, speechless. Martha was right. The poison meant to kill Gabriel had paradoxically given life to something new within him. As the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky, an urgent call came from hospital security. Cameras had picked up suspicious movement in the parking garage. Richard stood up, instantly alert. Could it be Marcus, returning to finish what he started? But when he checked the security feed, what he saw turned his blood cold. It wasn't Marcus alone, but a group of masked men moving stealthily toward the hospital entrance. And they were armed. The final assault was beginning. The alarm blared like a battle cry through the quiet pre-dawn corridors of the hospital. Richard fumbled for his phone, dialing security as he rushed to wake Paula and shield Gabriel. 5. "Amen, sir," the head of security reported, his voice tight with tension. "Breached the parking garage. They're heading for the pediatric wing." Richard's heart hammered against his ribs as he shook Paula awake. "Wake up. We have to get out of here." "What's happening?" Paula asked, groggy. "Armed men. We need to protect Gabriel." Panic flared in the room. Gabriel, still weak, started to cry at his parents' fear. Anna appeared at the door, Peter clutched in her arms, her eyes wide with terror. "Mister, the guards are telling everyone to hide." Richard made a split-second decision. "Martha," he called to the nurse rushing past, "is there anywhere safe to hide the children?" "The basement," she replied breathlessly. "Where they store old equipment. There's a door that locks from the inside. Take Gabriel, Anna, and Peter down there, now." As they helped transfer Gabriel to a wheelchair, the first sounds of violence reached them. Shouts, shattering glass, muffled pops that could only be gunfire. The hospital was under siege. "You're not coming?" Anna asked, grabbing Richard's hand. "I need to help the other patients. Go, I'll catch up." Heart pounding, Richard watched his family being hurried to safety. Then, steeling himself, he moved toward the main corridor. What he saw horrified him. Masked men shoved nurses against walls while others kicked open room doors. They weren't common thugs. They moved with tactical precision, coordinated and efficient. Richard recognized one by his arrogant stance, even masked. Marcus Vance. His cold eyes swept the pediatric wing with the focus of a hunter. "Where is—" "He?" Marcus snarled, grabbing a terrified nurse. "Where is Sterling's kid?" Rage boiled inside Richard. This man had poisoned Gabriel and now returned to finish the job. Something primal surged within him, a father protecting his young. "I'm here, Marcus," Richard shouted, stepping out from behind a supply cart. Marcus's eyes lit up with perverse satisfaction. "Finally showing yourself, coward. Where's the boy?" "Far from your reach." A cruel smile twisted Marcus's lips. "You think so? My men are sweeping the entire hospital." As if on cue, screams echoed from the floor above. Richard swallowed hard, praying the basement remained hidden. "Why are you doing this?" Richard asked, trying to buy time. "What do you gain by killing a child?" "It's not about gain," Marcus spat. "It's about making you pay. You destroyed me, Richard. Took my company, my reputation, my life. Now you'll feel what it's like to lose everything that matters. You were stealing from the company. You just destroyed me." Marcus advanced, a pistol suddenly appearing in his hand. "And now I'll do the same to you." A shot rang out, and Richard felt a searing pain in his shoulder. He crumpled to his knees, the world tilting. Marcus closed in, pressing the gun to his head. "Where is he?" The voice was a deadly whisper. Richard closed his eyes, bracing for the end. But the shot never came. A yelp of pain made Marcus whirl around. Anna stood at the end of the hall, clutching a used syringe she'd apparently jabbed into the nearest henchman's arm. Seizing the distraction, Martha darted out from a doorway and slammed Marcus across the head with a fire extinguisher. "Run!" Martha yelled at Richard. Ignoring the blinding pain, Richard scrambled to his feet and ran. Behind him, he heard Marcus bellowing furious orders. Anna guided him through darkened side corridors to a service stairwell. "Peter and your family are safe," she whispered breathlessly, "but other men are looking." In the damp, cluttered basement, Richard found Gabriel terrified but unharmed, clinging to Paula. Peter slept in a corner, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. The relief was momentary. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. They'd been found. "Is there another way out?" Richard asked desperately. Martha pointed to a heavy metal door. "Maintenance tunnel. Leads to the employee parking lot." As they prepared to flee, Richard paused. "Where are they taking everyone?" "Everyone?" Martha looked confused. "The other patients, the children?" A heavy silence fell. Richard understood with dawning horror. Marcus wasn't just after Gabriel. He was taking all the children. "The tests," he murmured. "He's using kids as guinea pigs for his drug." The basement door exploded inward with a powerful kick. Marcus stood there, flanked by two henchmen, his expression murderous, blood trickling from a gash on his head. "Playtime's over," he snarled, leveling his gun at Gabriel. Richard threw himself in front of his son, ready to shield him with his own body. But it was Anna who acted first. The small warrior grabbed a plastic jug of cleaning solution and hurled its contents into the eyes of the henchman. In the ensuing confusion, she screamed, "Run!" The group scattered. Richard scooped up Gabriel while Paula helped Peter. Martha bravely confronted the attackers, buying precious seconds. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and dark. Rats scurried underfoot as they stumbled forward blindly. Behind them, angry shouts echoed. Marcus was in the tunnel. When they finally emerged into the employee parking lot, the sky was beginning to lighten. The cool pre-dawn air had never felt so sweet. An employee's sedan was parked nearby, keys miraculously still in the ignition. "Get in!" Richard ordered, helping everyone cram inside. But as he turned the key, he realized Anna wasn't in the car. She had turned back into the tunnel. "Anna!" he yelled. "I have to help the other kids!" Her voice echoed back. "They're taking everyone!" Richard felt torn apart. He couldn't abandon Anna, but he couldn't risk Gabriel again. Paula gripped his arm. "Go, I'll get Gabriel somewhere safe." Heartbroken, Richard handed his wife the keys. "Go to the lake house. Stay hidden." He kissed his son quickly and sprinted back into the tunnel. He found Anna confronting Marcus alone, a tiny David against an armed Goliath. "It's over," Marcus laughed cruelly. "This little sewer rat isn't stopping me." Anna trembled but held her ground. "You're not taking any more kids." Marcus raised his gun, but a sharp voice stopped him. "Drop the weapon, Marcus." It was Dr. Mendez, backed by a heavily armed SWAT team. Finally, the authorities had arrived. The tension was palpable as Marcus weighed his options. For a moment, it looked like he might shoot Anna out of sheer spite. But then, with a final chilling smile, he lowered the gun. "This isn't over, Richard," he promised, as handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "You'll still pay." As they led Marcus away, Richard rushed to Anna, pulling her into a fierce hug. "You're crazy, you know that?" "Someone had to do something," she mumbled against his chest. But the relief was short-lived. The hospital was in chaos. 12 children had been abducted. The invaders had stolen supplies of experimental drugs. And worse, they left behind evidence of horrific tests conducted on homeless children. "How did we not see this before?" Richard murmured, horrified by the photos police had found. "Because nobody looks at the invisible children," Anna answered with wisdom far beyond her. Years. In the days that followed, Richard plunged into a reality that had always existed, but which he had chosen to ignore. Children disappearing, used as test subjects, dying without names or histories. Gabriel improved physically, but the emotional scars were deep. He woke screaming from nightmares. Paula, surprisingly, showed a strength Richard hadn't known. She possessed, caring for their son with tireless devotion. Anna and Peter moved into the Sterling mansion, but the transition was difficult. Anna distrusted the luxury, slept on the floor for weeks, and hoarded food. Peter barely spoke, traumatized by years of neglect. The investigation uncovered a network of horror. Marcus wasn't working alone. An entire organization was dedicated to using vulnerable children for illicit drug trials. The hospital was just one of many collection points. Richard felt crushed by guilt. While he'd built his empire, an industry of child suffering had flourished in the shadows. "It wasn't your fault," Dr. Mendez told him one day, finding him sunk in his study. "Nobody knew the extent." "We should have known," Richard replied bitterly. "We should have looked." It was Anna who pulled him out of the darkness. One evening, she found him surrounded by photos of missing children. "Mister, are you sad because you can't change the past?" "Yes, then change the future." The simple words held profound truth. Richard couldn't undo what Marcus had done, but he could fight to stop it from happening again. In the following months, Richard transformed. He sold non-essential businesses, poured money into shelters for homeless youth, funded investigations into child disappearances. Paula's foundation became a powerful force for child protection. Gabriel recovered slowly. The trauma left its mark, but family love and therapy helped. Anna became his protective shadow, teaching him resilience. Marcus was convicted, but his trial exposed a disturbing truth. He was part of something much larger. An international ring trafficking children for pharmaceutical experiments. The FBI got involved, and Richard offered all his resources to help dismantle the organization. One winter evening, a year after the attack, the family gathered in the living room. Gabriel played with Peter, while Anna helped Paula plan a charity dinner. Richard watched them, marveling at the changes. "What are you thinking about?" Paula asked, sitting beside him. "About how I almost lost everything," he answered quietly, "and how 2 invisible children saved our family." A cry interrupted. The moment, Gabriel had tripped and hit his head. As Richard rushed to him, he remembered those first hours in the hospital, the absolute terror of nearly losing his son. Gabriel was fine, just a small bump and a few tears. But the incident brought back painful memories. "Dad?" Gabriel said, hugging him tight. "Will you always protect me?" Richard swallowed hard, remembering how helpless he'd felt. "I'll do my very best, son." Anna came over, taking Gabriel's other hand. "Me too. Family protects family." Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Richard got a call. It was the FBI. "Mr. Sterling, we need your help. We've located another lab." The cycle was beginning again, but this time, Richard was ready. No longer the indifferent businessman, but a warrior protecting the vulnerable. "I'm on my way," he replied, grabbing his coat. In the hallway, he paused, looking into the rooms where his family slept peacefully. Gabriel and Peter shared a room now, while Anna had her own space, filled with books and stuffed animals she was still learning to cherish. Paula stirred as he moved. "Going hunting monsters again?" "They hunt us, love, just returning the favor." She nodded, understanding. "Be careful. Always have you and the kids to come back to." Downstairs, Richard ran into Martha, who'd been promoted to nursing supervisor but still made rounds visiting kids under their care. "Another mission?" she asked, knowing him too well. "Another battle in the war?" "Just don't forget we've won." "A few." Her words stayed with him as he drove through the sleeping city. They had won battles, saved Gabriel, exposed Marcus, protected dozens of children. But the war raged on, and Richard Sterling, the CEO who once only cared about profit, was now a soldier, shielding the defenseless. At the secret lab location, he found police rescuing terrified children, some sick, others traumatized, all desperately needing help. "Mr. Sterling," an officer greeted him, "your intel was spot on." Richard nodded absently, his eyes fixed on the children. Each small face reminded him of Gabriel, of Anna, of Peter, of all the children who had suffered while he lived in his bubble of privilege. A tiny girl latched onto his leg, sobbing. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms. "Shh, it's okay now," he whispered. "You're safe." The child burrowed against his chest, and something inside Richard finally broke. He wept silently, the tears he hadn't shed during Gabriel's crisis finally flowing freely. An officer approached. "We've got 18 kids here, all need urgent medical attention." "Take them all to St. Vincent City Hospital," Richard instructed. "Notify Dr. Mendez and tell them I'll cover all the costs." Hours later, as the sun rose, Richard returned home. He found Anna waiting on the porch, as if she knew exactly when he'd arrive. "Did you save more kids?" she asked. "We tried." "That makes me proud." Richard sat beside her, the two watching the dawn in silence. The journey had transformed them all in unimaginable ways. "Anna," he finally said, "thank you for saving our family. You saved mine first." "I wish I could save every child in the world," Anna offered a wise smile. "You save them one at a time. That's how it works." As the sun climbed higher, Richard Sterling realized he had found his true purpose. Not in money or power, but in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The scar on his shoulder throbbed, a reminder of the price almost paid for his past selfishness. But it was also a symbol of transformation. From the cold businessman who nearly lost everything, a man determined to make a difference had emerged. Inside, Gabriel woke screaming from another nightmare. But this time, when Richard ran to comfort him, he found Anna already there, holding her adopted brother's hand, whispering words of courage. "It's okay," she was saying. "You're strong. We're strong together." And for the first time, in months, Gabriel drifted back to sleep without fear. The journey was far from over. Marcus would rot in prison, but his network still needed dismantling. Children would continue to need help. Battles remained to be fought. But looking at his family, Gabriel and Peter sleeping peacefully, Paula working tirelessly at the foundation, Anna radiating courage and hope, Richard knew he was no longer alone in the fight. Family protects family, and his family had grown to include all the lost and forgotten children of the world. As the day unfolded, bringing new challenges and hopes, Richard Sterling faced each moment with renewed determination. The poison meant to destroy him had paradoxically distilled his purest essence, and in the painful process of nearly losing everything, he had found something far more valuable: himself. 3 years had passed since the night the hospital was invaded. The summer heat baked the city streets as Richard drove through the neighborhood where it all began. From the back seat, Gabriel, now 12, looked out the window curiously. "Dad, why are we coming to this part of town?" Richard smiled in the rearview mirror. "It's a surprise, Anna's suggestion." Beside Gabriel, Anna, now 13 and officially adopted into the Sterling family, held the hand of Peter, who at 10 was still shy but far more confident. The side of the gleaming new hospital wing Richard had funded, a banner proclaimed, "Grand Opening, the Anna Sterling Institute for Child Protection." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. "Mister, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Richard replied, pulling into the parking lot. "You taught us how to see. It was the least I could do." As they got out of the car, Martha rushed over to greet them, now the director of nursing for the renovated hospital complex. The modern building stood in stark contrast to the old St. Vincent City Hospital, but retained its core mission of compassionate care. "The ceremony starts in half an hour," Martha informed them, hugging Anna warmly. "Are you ready to cut the ribbon?" Anna nodded, but her gaze drifted towards the main entrance. "Where's my mom?" Richard exchanged a knowing glance with Paula. "She's on her way." It was a white lie. Anna's biological mother had been located 3 months prior, living in another state. The reunion had been painful. The woman, ravaged by addiction, barely recognized her daughter. But Anna, with the quiet strength she always possessed, had decided to help her too, from afar. "Mister," Anna whispered as they walked into the hospital, "I know she's not coming, but it's okay. You guys are my family now." The inauguration was filled with emotional speeches. Local officials lauded Richard's transformation, politicians once indifferent to inequality now praising his efforts. There was hypocrisy in the air, but also tangible change. During his own speech, Richard looked out at his family. Gabriel, still in therapy for the trauma, but now a passionate advocate for affected children. Peter, who had discovered a gift for music and now played the piano beautifully. Anna, studying hard, determined to become a doctor so no other child would suffer without help. 3 years ago, Richard began, his voice thick with emotion, I almost lost my son. In that darkest moment, a little girl appeared and changed not just our lives, but showed me a world I had chosen not to see. Anna sat between Gabriel and Peter, holding both their hands tightly. They were 3 children who should have died, but instead, they found family in each other. I think about that day a lot, Richard continued his speech. The desperation I felt, the helplessness watching my son suffer. But now I know that suffering had a purpose. It opened my eyes to the invisible suffering that happens every single day on the streets of this city. After the ceremony, while touring the modern hospital facilities, a young doctor approached Richard. It was the same resident who had helped during Gabriel's crisis, now more experienced, but with the same passion in his eyes. "Mr. Sterling, do you have a moment?" Richard followed him to a special wing. "We wanted to show you something." In the pediatric oncology unit, an entire wall was covered with children's drawings. In the center, a plaque read, "The Survivor's Wall." "Each drawing is from a child who made it through," the doctor explained, inspired by Gabriel's story. A lump formed in Richard's throat. Among the colorful pictures, he saw a special one. Gabriel hugging Anna with the caption, "Family is who we choose." Back at the opening reception, Richard was intercepted by a man in a dark suit. His heart leaped until he recognized him, an FBI agent working the child trafficking network case. "Mr. Sterling, I have news." "Did you get them?" Richard asked anxiously. The agent nodded grimly. "We dismantled the last cell yesterday. Hundreds of children were rescued, dozens involved arrested. And Marcus Vance. We learned something interesting during the final interrogation." The agent lowered his voice. "Marcus wasn't the leader. He was just a piece." Richard's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "There was someone above him. Someone very close to you." Before the agent could say more, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the hall. A man had burst into the reception, pointing a gun towards the stage where Anna stood. "It's over!" he screamed. "You'll pay for destroying our business." Chaos erupted. People screamed and scattered, but Richard only saw one thing, the gun aimed at Anna. Without thinking, he sprinted towards the gunman. The man turned, firing. Richard felt fire bloom in his chest but kept moving. He tackled the assailant just before another shot could ring out. "Dad!" Gabriel cried, rushing towards him. Richard sank to his knees, blood staining his white shirt. Anna reached him first, her small hands pressing against the wound. "No, mister, you're not going to die, not after everything." Doctors swarmed around him. Martha took charge, her experienced hands working swiftly, even as tears streamed down. Her face, "He's going to be okay," she promised, but her voice betrayed her desperation. As he was rushed towards the ICU, Richard gripped Anna's hand. "You saved our family." Again. "Don't talk," Anna pleaded. "Save your strength." In the ICU, fighting for his life, Richard drifted through dreams and memories. He saw Gabriel unconscious 3 years ago, Anna appearing like a street angel, Paula showing strength he never knew she had, Peter smiling for the first time. He saw all the rescued children, the smiles brought back, the darkness turned to light, and then a revelation. On the edge of consciousness, a familiar voice whispered, "I'm so sorry." It was Dr. Sophia Reyes, the former clinical director. She was standing in the ICU, watching him with eyes full of guilt. "It was me," she confessed, thinking he was unconscious. "I was tired of seeing children die for lack of resources. When the pharmaceutical company offered money to test drugs, I thought I could help, but then it turned into a monster." Richard forced his eyes open. "You used children. Only the ones nobody would miss," she whispered brokenly. "But then you had to show up with your golden boy, draw attention to the whole program." The final truth landed like a hammer blow. It wasn't just Marcus's revenge, it was a cog in a cruel machine that preyed on the most vulnerable. "Why?" Richard managed to rasp. "Because nobody cares about who disappears in the shadows. Except you had to see, you had to care, you had to destroy everything." Security burst into the ICU, alerted by the FBI agent. Dr. Reyes was detained, still confessing her crimes. But for Richard, the revelation brought a profound understanding. Marcus was a broken man seeking revenge. Dr. Reyes was a desperate woman, justifying evil with good intentions. The real battle was against the indifference that allowed such suffering to exist. Days later, when he woke up properly after surgery, he found his family surrounding the bed. Gabriel held his right hand, Anna his left. Peter was asleep, curled up against Paula. "You gave us quite a scare," Gabriel said, trying to hold back tears. "Sorry," Richard whispered, "but I couldn't let him hurt Anna." "I know," Gabriel managed, a smile. Family protects family. During the weeks of recovery, Richard received daily visitors. Children from Anna's institute brought drawings. Volunteers shared stories of transformed lives. Even some of the children rescued from the labs came to thank him. But the most significant visit came from Martha, holding something in her hands. "We found this among Dr. Reyes's belongings," she said, handing him an old newspaper clipping. "Thought you'd want to see it." The headline showed a young, idealistic doctor receiving an award for excellence. It was Sophia Reyes, 20 years earlier, before the darkness consumed her. "She was good once," Richard murmured. "Everyone's good before the world gets to them," Anna replied, displaying wisdom beyond her years from her chair nearby. "That's why we have to protect the children, so they don't get lost." On the day of his discharge from the hospital, a surprise awaited Richard. Anna had organized a celebration in the park where Gabriel liked to play soccer. Dozens of children, from the institute, from the streets, from the hospital, were there. "What's all this?" Richard asked, deeply moved. "A family," Anna answered simply. "Our family." Gabriel pulled his dad into a makeshift game. Peter played music for everyone. On a portable keyboard, Paula handed out food. She had prepared with help from some of the kids. Martha and other doctors from the hospital joined the party. Under the blue sky, Richard looked around and saw not just his immediate family, but an entire community forged through overcoming adversity. All these children had stories of pain, but now they were writing new narratives of hope. "Do you still think about Dr. Evans sometimes?" Anna asked, sitting beside him on a park bench. "Yes, and about how easily any of us can get lost on the wrong path. But we can also find our way back," she observed, "like you did." Richard put his arm around Anna. "You found me, actually." That night back home, as he tucked Gabriel into bed, his son asked, "Dad, do you think the poison they gave me had a purpose?" Richard thought carefully. "I think the poison was the evil men do, but the antidote was our family's love, and we get to choose which one defines our story." Gabriel nodded, satisfied. "Then we choose love." Months later, at Dr. Reyes's trial, Richard was called to testify. She watched him, expecting hatred, but found compassion in his eyes instead. "You destroyed lives," Richard told the court, "but you also showed me how indifference can consume even the best intentions. I don't ask for leniency, I ask for reflection." The sentence was severe, but just. As she was led away, Dr. Reyes whispered one last plea. "Help the children. All of them." "We already are," Richard replied quietly. The years that followed were ones of growth and healing. Gabriel became a doctor, specializing in pediatric toxicology. Anna developed a revolutionary outreach program for homeless youth. Peter composed music that played in children's hospitals across the country. Paula spearheaded legislative changes for child protection, while Richard transformed his business empire into a force for social good. But it was on a cold winter day, 10 years after Gabriel's poisoning, that the journey found its true conclusion. Richard stood in the cemetery visiting Dr. Evans's grave, not to assign blame, but to seek understanding. A familiar figure approached. "Didn't expect to see you here," Martha said, placing flowers on the headstone. "Nor you." He saved my daughter. Once, she explained quietly, before all this, he was a good man who got lost. Richard nodded. We can all get lost, and we can all be found, she completed the thought. They walked together towards the exit, where Gabriel, Anna, and Peter were waiting. A family forged in pain, bound by love, growing in purpose. Dad, Gabriel called out, let's go. We have that benefit dinner for the kids at the Institute. Richard smiled. The cycle completed itself, but it didn't end. Every child saved became a savior for others. Every pain transformed into healing. Every poison an antidote for other sorrows. As they drove through the city, they passed the old St. Vincent's City Hospital building, now a museum dedicated to social transformation. A plaque near the entrance read, "Here, a family was born. From suffering," Anna pointed to the plaque. "Do you think our story will inspire others?" "Our story," Richard corrected gently, "is just the beginning. Every child we save writes a new chapter." That evening at the dinner, surrounded by the family fate had brought into his path, Richard raised a toast. "To the poison that almost destroyed us," he said, surprising everyone, "and to the love that saved us. May we always know how to see the invisible and love the forgotten." "And may we never forget," Anna added, her eyes shining, "that family is who we choose to love." Gabriel, Peter, and Paula raised their glasses. The guests at the benefit dinner, former street kids now thriving adults, parents of rescued children, volunteers and donors, joined the toast. In the quiet that followed, as everyone drank, Richard heard in his mind the echo of that first cry, "Mister, I know who poisoned your son," and he smiled, because that cry had been the beginning not only of his salvation, but of a family that transcended blood, a love that overcame trauma, and a hope that shone brighter for having survived the darkness. The poison had been the catalyst, but the antidote, love, family, redemption, that had been their collective choice, and they had chosen well. In the shadows outside the brightly lit hall, a street kid watched through the window, hungry and scared. Gabriel noticed first, remembered himself in the hospital, and without hesitation walked to the door. "Want to come in?" he asked, holding out his hand. "There's room for one more in the family." The child hesitated, then took the offered hand. As they were led inside to food, warmth, and love, Richard knew their story would keep repeating, because that's what families do. They grow, they heal, they save, and love, he realized, truly is the antidote to all the world's poisons. The years would pass, more children would be saved, more stories would be written, but in that moment, in that room filled with light and laughter, Richard Sterling was exactly where he was meant to be. Home, with his family, with his purpose. Whole, not despite the suffering, but because of it. And in that understanding, he found the peace he had sought since that little girl appeared in the hospital, changing his life forever. The cycle was complete, yet the story continued. Because as long as there are children needing rescue, there will be families choosing love. And that is the truest antidote of all.